I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z Podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, the former founder of Electric, and now a co-founder of Scaleless. And today I'm talking with Steven Sakach, who's the founder and CEO of Zero Company, as well as the co-founder and CEO of AI CMO. Thanks for coming on the show.
Great to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So before we dive into everything, can you give everybody just a quick background on your entrepreneurial journey and the two different companies you're currently running?
Yeah, for sure. So we're in the digital marketing space. And I remember like years ago, maybe a couple decades ago, going to this consciousness seminar, where we're talking about things like oneness and stages of consciousness and integral theory and, all these different philosophies and stuff. And like, well, how are you going to apply this to your business? I'm like, back then it's like, well, we do like a Google ad, for people. And this is like 20 years ago. So you've got like one headline, a couple descriptions. How do you fit, higher consciousness concepts into that? And really kind of the journey has been, how do you do that? And especially coming from a marketing standpoint. So, it was just asking that question over and over until we're like, oh, really? It's all these other things around your business that you can do, maybe from like a lot of people familiar with like a conscious capitalist approach to stuff. And for us, it really became kind of this journey. We've got this mantra that we've always used called BLISS, which is build love into scalable systems. That's what kind of it stands for. And so we just kind of put that to work for us from the marketing standpoint. So what does that mean when we're building love into, marketing or into our systems? And it's just really dive into every part of your business and you start thinking about that question, which I think is an important one today, especially, there's like Gallup studies showing that only 23% of employees are engaged worldwide, right? That's a tragedy. That 77% are active, either not engaged or actively engaged. It's just, and as we spend so much time in our lives, at business, doing business, and to have people so disengaged with that, it's like, well, why? And so from a marketing standpoint for us, it was really about how can we help build meaning into companies? How can we help build love into companies? And so we started asking that question a lot more. And it really became this sort of empathetic, marketing approach to how we do that. Long story short, that ended up, kind of directing our agency. And then we built this software that we just launched recently. It's called the AI Chief Marketing Officer. And really what it was designed was trying to build that empathetic marketing kind of leadership that we wanted, from a tool standpoint. If we could build like a chief marketing officer that, we love to work with, what would that look like? And so we started building that out and spent about a couple years doing that. And it's really focusing on kind of that empathetic approach that I talked to about marketing, trying to make emotional connections. And one of the ways we do that is starts out with trying to help you define your business's higher purpose, if you can. And that's a good place to start if you're trying to find meaning in what you do, is defining that. And you've probably talked about that a bit on this show for sure.
What was the process like trying to take what you do from a services standpoint and then get that into a software and also, leverage AI, which obviously is all the buzz over the last 18 to 24 months.
Yeah. And with AI too, it's like, it's changing rapidly as you're going along, right? So you're like, okay, what are we going to build that won't be replaced by like Microsoft Copilot in, a couple years, or that the technology won't even exist because, OpenAI has solved that problem or whatever. So you've got kind of this moving target that you kind of have to feel ahead of the curve. But really for us, it was like, what is our process, for any given client? If we could give them as much expertise and build it into a single tool, what would that look like? And so it was breaking down each of these elements into separate tools. And there's probably like 100 different tools in there that it does, but no one's going to want to use something that's like 100 different tools, right? So it's like, okay, we've got it about 100 different things it can do. How can we boil that down to maybe 10 different things in a tool, and take you through this process that will leverage maybe about 100 different expert approaches to marketing in there, right? Do that, and then along with our mantra of trying to build love into a scalable system, how can we do this so that it helps companies build love into what they're doing, and tell those kind of stories that are much more connecting.
What's it been like making the transition from running a services org to a software company?
Yeah, we're still so it's really becoming sort of another part of our company, right? It's sort of a branch out of our company. And it's like, the interesting part is we've almost got like this working lab of marketers that we can test the tools on all the time. So we can iterate and things like that. So that's been exciting. And then the same time frame too, we're also like, maybe we're a little crazy, but we're kind of reorganizing our company to be more like self-managed kind of pod structures, which is, kind of the sort of next level kind of business structure at the same time. So, which really helped us to kind of bring everybody together in different ways with their expertise, so that we've got our AI dev team talking to our sales people, or talking to our marketers, and really working together in that. So it's been a, certainly a challenge, but it's been fun. Actually, this has probably been the most fun I've had is the past couple of years trying to go through this whole process.
You mentioned transitioning into like a pod structure. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what that actually entails, and how that might be different from how most businesses are set up?
Yeah, I think most businesses, and this is part of that problem that we talked about with that, engagement, they're like this hierarchical structure, right? Where it's sort of top down, everyone cracking down the hierarchy on each other. And so I think that starts with leadership kind of understanding that, no, you're actually in service to your teams, to your employees, right? And so that really, you kind of have to start with leadership, modeling EQ and being empathetic, and kind of understanding some of that, because what you're going to then do is allow people that you're serving to become leaders themselves. And so you've got, for us, it'd be like different marketing execs or sales people that come together in these different pod structures, and really allows them to almost find what they love the most. Hey, I'm working with, instead of working in kind of a silo doing my job, now I'm working with this team, and one of the team members says, hey, I really love doing this. Another team person might be, oh yeah, I hate that. You take all that work, and now I really love doing this other end. So what you end up having though is people who end up being very much more passionate about their different roles in there. And I think that really does help that engagement process that we've had. And it's just been fun seeing people participate in new ways that they haven't before.
Yeah, I think putting the ownership in the team members is always a good call, no matter how you go about actually putting that into practice. So long as they're willing to take that on. And
yeah, you see what they want to take on. You want to give them freedom, but accountability, right? So give them a lot more freedom, but also a little bit more accountability. And then this is where really going back to having that purpose in your business, where if you have a well-defined purpose, that becomes kind of the boss, right? For everyone. It's like, this is the guide rails. How we get there, we don't know, but this is the guide rails, right? Is this higher purpose that you're doing. So that really allows leadership a little bit to step back, let go, and let them find a way to that purpose. And so, that becomes that freedom part. that we talked about. So that's been a fun process, but we're doing that in the middle of everything else we're doing.
What have been some of like the biggest gotchas you would say along your entrepreneurial journey that you took away as pretty big learning lessons that you've leveraged over time?
Biggest gotchas. Yeah, I think really a lot of what you should be doing as a business person is really thinking empathetically as much as you can, because you can have great ideas and it may not resonate. And so like resonance is sort of everything, I think, especially when it comes to marketing, right? You want stories that resonate, but also you want a job with meaning, that resonates with people. And since, we're kind of talking Gen Z, I feel like the younger generations, they kind of get this more and faster, than previous generations. Could be because of all the work other generations have done, but, going back to studying consciousness, they're coming up to a place of consciousness much faster, much quicker. And so meaning becomes much more important early on in lives, and so you're looking for a job that resonates with you. You're looking for, meaning. And now we've got even younger generations who are going to be pretty much waking up in the AI algorithm space, right? Like this is they're born with this. They're raised by the feed and, taught to consume, I guess, and definitely the most marketed to generations in history, right? Because it's constantly coming at people now. And so, they know every trick. They know when they're being manipulated, and they know when something doesn't sound authentic a lot easier, right? And so I think really going back to that purpose in your company and kind of understanding sort of a North Star so that you can be about it is just the sooner you can figure that out with your company, I think the better off you're going to be. And so it did take us a while just to figure that out, because it's like, how do we, develop these higher consciousness thoughts into, doing ads. It wasn't an easy journey, but I think we made some good strides there.
Yeah, I feel like the BS detector that consumers have now for marketing is way higher than what it used to be.
Yeah.
And so the bar is so much greater for organizations, whether it's B2B or B2C.
Yeah, and people, it's like they think maybe the younger generations even are like, they're not anti-business, they're anti-BS, right? They don't hate brands, they hate inauthenticity, right? It's because it doesn't resonate. They reject being manipulated. And so I think the future of marketing, it's really got to go to that more of that authentic space. You got to be about it.
Yeah. When you're working with the business, how do you go about extracting from them the information that you need to be able to help them deploy successful, empathetic marketing campaigns?
Yeah. So that's really kind of what we tried to build out quite a bit in the AI CMO tool, which is, I think, starting with kind of digging down into purpose first. And so we've got kind of a tool in there that you could either spend an hour with or 5 minutes with, depending on how much time you want to spend with it. But it's really like, help us define a general purpose for you in some way that resonates with you. It doesn't have to be the most, eloquent purpose necessarily out of the gates, but if we can at least use that as a guide rail, then we can then kind of move on to a next step is like, okay, well, how can we do something that will emotionally connect with your audience? And so most marketers, you start with that basic customer journey, kind of exercise, right? Like, what are they going through in this customer journey? And so we've really tried to take that to more of a, what are the emotions they're feeling during these different stages? Because really that's kind of the key part of that is empathetic marketing. It's how people feel, right? And I think when you get to that process of advertising to them, there's all different ways they feel. And then when they're actually consuming that product, there's the consumption emotions, right? And this is where they can either be your biggest advocate, right? And your brand ambassador and all these things. If you hit it right, if you, bring them some surprise or some delight kind of emotions in there and pull that out of it. Um, and, or they can be like, on social media, this is trash. I don't like this, blah, blah, blah. And now you got the opposite problem, right? But so we're going through that process of even the consumption emotions. Like, how can we have a surprise and delight tool in there. It's like, how can we help you build something into your business that taps into those emotions so that the experience people are having is one that really takes them to the next level. So, because if you can build an emotional connection, there's studies out there, you'll get 306% improved lifetime value over a satisfied customer. That's over a satisfied customer. But if you make that extra step to really try and emotionally connect with them, this is where you do find those communities around brands and things like that, right?
When it comes to like actually deploying a campaign, what are your typical channels that you're working through with organizations? And are you typically doing like B2B or
It'll depend.
B2C?
So yeah, it'll depend on what's kind of in their best interest. So you obviously, I just think you kind of want to start with the low hanging fruit, whatever that may be for you. But if it's a business, maybe your audience is on LinkedIn, right? If it's but they're probably also doing some kind of search on Google as well, of some type. And those searches might be in different stages of that, maybe they're just educating themselves right now, or maybe they're trying to choose between two products or something. So you have different stages that they're at even in those searches. And so you want to be able to speak to each of those stages so that you're relevant to them and you're emotionally connecting to them. But we'll do everything from search to, any social channel, to programmatic advertising, which is maybe like your Hulu, TV kind of things. And programmatic is really the area where you get into things can get really creepy with, with this kind of stuff you can do that you can just target individual, if there's 10 houses on this street, I want to target that one specific house for whatever reason, right? And because our phones are so, they tell us a lot about ourselves. Programmatic has a lot of stuff there. We just have to be careful. It's like, where's the line of creepy and helping people? Sometimes it gets a little blurry, but we're like, nope, that's too creepy.
I swear my phone is listening to me. I mean, the amount of times that I have gotten an Instagram ad or something about a conversation that I was having, 45 minutes before, it's adding up to the point where,
you're like, something's not right here. But yeah, and what's interesting is like you can take your phone into like your friend's house or something, and suddenly now you're seeing an ad that's directed just to you. It's like, wait a minute, how did that happen? But there's literally, there's ways you can do that kind of stuff where it's just like, I don't know what year we are now. It's just getting crazy. We're in the future. We've got AI. We've got, ads tracking us around everywhere.
Are there any like new tools, technologies, advertising platforms that you're excited about this year?
Well, certainly I think, we've been in AI a lot, like even before like this new, sort of generative AI phase, but for, a decade or so, if you're doing any kind of Google ad or any other, platform, you're working with AI to some extent. And I'd say there's probably some individual tools in certain platforms that can be used really uniquely, like Google, for instance. You've got like their Performance Max or some kind of campaign or a demand gen campaign, and you can either use those horribly wrong or you can use them exactly right, and it'll do some very sophisticated stuff where if you're buying a car, you're getting touched, you got about 700 touch points in that buying process, right? Which is kind of crazy if you think about it. And so humans, we can only help market to some extent, along those different touch points and try and build that out. But at some point, AI is really going to be pretty brilliant at understanding all of those and figuring out where you are. So that's where I think some of the platforms are getting better at. So, not necessarily an individual platform, but some of that technology is really improving.
Yeah, it feels like every day there's a new update or some sort of advancement that we're able to leverage in some way. I mean, like maybe half of what we have in our platform right now would not have been possible a year ago because either the accuracy or the price or just the actual functionality that it is providing wasn't there, and it's just seeming to multiply on itself even more so.
Yeah. For us, when we're developing the AI Chief Marketing Officer tool, really we were focusing on this empathetic approach, and we knew one of the key elements is the closer it can be to human senses, the better it's going to be, right? And then along came that sort of vision element, right, in that development process. And so we didn't start out, we said, this is going to come along at some point where AI is going to be able to see and tell you stuff about it. So we kind of programmed a bit around that until the capabilities came. And then we're like, yes, now this is perfect. We want this vision to be seen in our tools so that you can upload basically any kind of picture and say, hey, here's my marketing problem. Help me fix this. And it'll do it from expert level, no matter what that is. So it could be, hey, here's my trade show booth, right? How can I improve this? Or here's my window display. How can I, improve that? Or even the interior of my store or my restaurant. And so now you've given AI this vision so that it can be a little bit more empathetic in kind of solving that problem. So it's cool watching some of these developments come along, but as it gets these more human senses or capabilities, then I think it'll have more ability to be empathetic the way we want it.
Is your new software product, is that all bootstrapped, or did you raise outside funding for that?
Yeah, that was all bootstrapped. Developed it from spend about two years almost working through that process, and really we launched. It was about a month and a half ago, so 6 weeks ago or so, when we kind of soft launched. But yeah, that was, it's not an easy process to do. But the nice thing is, like, we already had a functioning business and, like I said, a working lab of marketers where we could test things and iterate things and actually use these tools to make our marketing better at the same time. So, it wasn't like being sort of cold turkey starting up from nothing, which is much harder to do.
What would you say are like the pros and cons of that approach? I mean, obviously building within, the service offering that you currently are providing has its own advantages, but being able to take, profits and revenue from other sources and then invest that into software. I've heard, pros and cons from people of, going to raise the VC route and then also just bootstrapping. And I think bootstrapping is picking up more and more steam over the last 2 years as VC funding has either dried up or it's been a little bit less glamorized than it was historically. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for us, because we're really, in a way, trying to do something that's really about kind of radical love in business, if we can. And so for us to kind of be caretakers of that vision without it being, pulled in one direction or another, I think that's a huge benefit for us as far as bootstrapping. It's not going to work if, we're coming from, say, like a conscious capitalist approach or maybe a level above that as well, as far as business consciousness. And we've got, say, some investment company that's, more in a traditional approach to things where it's just not going to work. And if you studied like some of these organizations that are sort of those next level businesses that work, and when they don't work, it's when they bring someone in who's kind of not seeing eye to eye on that consciousness part, right? And then everything just starts disconnecting and falling apart. So that's, to me, it's like, all right, we want to kind of make our case if we can on our own without having to be influenced, one way or another. There are good conscious VC folks out there as well that will be along with you in that journey too. So I think you could probably find that route, but it's much rarer.
Yeah, I mean, there's bad money and there's good money for sure. So
yeah, exactly. So we're like just being able to control the vision, I think, is really important to us right now.
Well, I really appreciate you hopping on and sharing all these insights with us. But before we jump, can you let people know where they could connect or find you online, and also the types of businesses that you typically work with as well?
Yeah, go to aicmo.io. That's the Artificial Intelligence Chief Marketing Officer software there. Really, we test it with any kind of business. The crazier, the better. We think it's just fun because it's like, oh, wow, how can you build love into this type of business or find a purpose for this type of business? And sometimes those are the ones that are impacted the most. And so we're trying to test it on every type of business we come across just to see how it reacts. So yeah, go there, check that out. Our digital agency, zerocompany.com, ZERO company spelled out.com. You can check us out there if you need any. If you're trying to tell, more of a emotionally connecting story with your business, in the digital space, we'd love to help you about that. That's what we're all about.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. For everybody who's listening, as always, this is Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com or scaleless.ai. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.